Everyone, and thank you for joining us on this, the final video from a visit made by Cathy and I to York in September 25. In the last video, we got as far as York Station. After that, we went to the National Railway Museum. Absolutely great, lovely. I took lots of video. When I came to transfer it to the computer, halfway through the transfer, the SD card decided that it would just, and that was it. I'd lost all my stuff. I don't know what it's done. I've tried to recover it. I can't open it in any way, shape, or form. And so, for the moment, at least, all that video is lost. If I get it back, obviously, I'll make an extra video about it. But it just, well, I don't know. I don't know the word I'm looking for. But anyway, it just decided it was going to give up the ghost halfway through the transfer, and everything gone. So, what I've done. Cathy took some photos inside the museum this year, so I have begun the video by using her photos of the National Railway Museum, and then at the end, I'm going back a few years to my first visit, or the last visit before this one, in 1979. And let's have a look at the contrast between the two, shall we? So do stick with me. There won't be any boring music on this video. It'll just be my boring voice giving a commentary. But nonetheless, I hope you'll enjoy it. I suppose this is a logical place to start, really. The Liverpool and Manchester Railway, probably the world's first, what you might call, intercity railway. And home to the famous Rainhill trials, where the first widely recorded fatality was known. A very prominent gentleman called William Huskisson. His wasn't the first death. There'd been quite a few on the railways before that, but I guess his was probably the first one on a passenger carrying railway, perhaps, and the first one, as I say, that was widely reported. He had got off one of the trains while it was stopped to take coal and water, against everybody's advice. And when a train came along on the other line, hauled by Stephenson's rocket, he panicked. And as he was trying to get on board his train, the door flew open because it wasn't on the latch properly, and he was flung into the path of rocket and cast in front of it. I won't go into the horrific injuries he suffered, but later on that evening, he died from those particular injuries. So it just goes to show that even in those days and at slow speed, railways can be a dangerous place if you're not careful. But that's a bit of the history that goes with that particular carriage. So thanks, Cathy, for recording that. In 1938, Gresley A4 Pacific Mallard set a world speed record for a steam locomotive of 126 miles per hour. This at that time was considered quite some achievement, especially for steam. However, it has to be borne in mind that everything mechanical has its limits. In achieving that speed record, Mallard exceeded those limits. It had to be stopped at Peterborough because of bearing seizures, and it was took out of service, and extensive repairs needed to be done to the works of it. But it ended up going out on the main line again. However, Evening Star. This was the last steam locomotive built by British Railways, completed in 1960. It's classified 9F, which is the highest classification you could have, and was literally built to haul heavy freight, particularly over the Somerset and Dorset Railway, which is well known for its ups and downs. It was actually withdrawn in 1965, having been the only locomotive earmarked for preservation right from when it was built. The National Railway Museum wanted it for their collection, and It did spend some years preserved, being lent out to some preserved railways, but it is now, as you can see here, a static exhibit in the National Railway Museum at York. Stephenson's rocket, of course, is one of the most famous locomotives of all time, and in 1935 they built a working replica. And this is it in the Great Hall at the National Railway Museum. But the other side, as you can see here, looks totally different. It's been cut away so you can see what happens inside the workings. Very interesting to compare one side to the other, but here indeed is a record of railway history. We move on to this one now. Designed by William Strudley for light duties on the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway. This is an A1 Terrier, built in 1880 and was one of the last to be withdrawn from service in 1946. Many of them were actually withdrawn before 1900, so some of them had a very, very short life indeed. Many of them had names from the southeast, and this one is no exception. This is Box Hill. When the Channel Tunnel opened back in 1994, there was just Le Shuttle, taking cars and coaches and vans and lorries across the channel from Folkestone. But by 1996, we started having our express passenger trains, at that time starting from Waterloo, before St Pancras was converted. And here we see a power car from one of the original units. It's Class 373 tops classification. This was supplied in 1996 and is one of the withdrawals that's been going on over the last few years as they're gradually being, shall we say, complemented by and superseded by the Class 374s. Western Railway were innovators in their time, and one of the things that they did was to bring in the concept of self-propelled rail cars capable of making fast journeys between 2 points. This original design, introduced in 1934, obviously Art Deco era, hence its streamlined design, and because of that they became known as flying bananas. Later designs had a more angular front, two of which survive. One is at the Didcot Railway Centre, and the other angular one is currently being rebuilt at the Kenton East Sussex Railway and should be out on the rails again in the not too distant future. We've seen representatives of the Big Four so far: London North Eastern Railway, Great Western Railway, and now we move to the Southern Railway. And here is a locomotive designed in 1934 and built by Mansell. This one is a schools class, and of course each one was named after a famous public school, this one being Cheltenham, as we'll see in a moment. And this particular locomotive lasted until 1962, and when it was withdrawn it was in sufficient condition, was earmarked for preservation. Initially at the NRM it was preserved in its southern livery, but here we are showing it in British Railways green or lined green. The choice is yours. It's only fair to give the London, Midland and Scottish a view now, and this completes the Big Four. Here is an unusual view of one of their streamlined locomotives. This was built in 1938. This is Duchess of Hamilton, built at a time when the two rival companies heading to the north, the LNER and the LMS, were building streamlined sets to try and give the fastest journeys from London to Scotland. This loco was eventually de-streamlined, and when it was withdrawn in the early 60s, it was bought by Sir Billy Butlin and displayed in Butlin's camp in Minehead until the mid-70s. when it was bought for preservation. It did run for a number of years on the main line until its boiler ticket ran out in the mid 1990s. Since then, it has had the streamlining added again, and this is how you see it displayed here in the main hall in the The final steam locomotive we're looking at here predates the Big Four by some years. This is the North Eastern Railway Class 1001 locomotive, the first of which were built in 1852. You can see quite a modern design for 1852. I suspect this might have been one of the later ones because they were built until 1875, although the last of them weren't withdrawn until 1923. This one preserved here, the National Railway Museum, is number 1275. We move on almost 100 years now to 1960-61, when the electrification of the West Coast main line began with sections north of Crewe, Crewe to Manchester and Crewe to Preston, something like that, or Carlisle, I think. And among several classes of these AL electric locomotives was the class represented by here, which is now known as the Class 84. 10 of these were built between 1960 and 61, and right from the very start, they were beset with problems. They were all withdrawn once, and then when the decision was made to extend electrification to Glasgow, they were sort of rebuilt and refurbished and put back into service again, but they had the same problems as before. And this particular class were all gone by 1980. Railways in this country are very late on the superfast train service concept. Here is the leading car of a Japanese Shinkansen bullet train. I think the first ones of these ran as far back as 1964. This one was built in 1976 and very generously donated to the museum in the early 2000s. When you sit inside it, as we were able to, the standard of comfort in those days, it far exceeds even what you can find on a mainline train in the UK now. There's certainly no ironing board to sit on in that side of the hydraulics. This is probably my favourite class of diesel locomotive. This is the Deltic, known as Class 55 in latter days on British Railways, built between 1960 and 61. Relatively small class of locos, but when they were introduced, they were the most powerful diesel locos in the world. They had Napier Deltic engines, which had crankshafts arranged in a triangular formation, hence the Deltic name. And they ran until the last one, I think, was 1981, when they were superseded by the HST units. And having said that, we still have HST units left in Scotland. And that proves the longevity of some of the British Rail and British Railways designed locomotives and multiple units. I'm not sure that those being delivered today are going to last anywhere near as long, to be honest. And before we move on, I'd like to say a big thank you to our friend Rob, who made a special journey all the way over from Carlisle to spend probably about 2 hours with us at the museum. But it was good to see him, and thanks, Rob, for making the journey. And this, of course, is the three of us, me, Rob, and Cathy. Now, I'm going to take you back in time. I thought it might be interesting to see, in contrast to what I've just shown you, some slides that I took in my last visit to York, which was way back in 1979. The NRM hadn't been opened very long, but I took a couple of shots here on York Station, and then we'll have a look at a couple of pictures I took actually inside the museum all those years ago. And here is a Deltic in service. And here we have a Peak class loco, class 46, called a Peak because quite a few of the class were originally named after mountains, etc., in the Lake District. This class lasted from the early 60s until probably the late 80s. And here we have, on a very good day for train spotting, one of the 200 strong Class 40s, nicknamed Whistlers because of the noise of their turbochargers. And these were quite long-lived locomotives, the first ones being delivered as early as 1958. Of course, we couldn't leave out the Class 47, with 512 built, the largest class of diesel loco ever built for British Railways, around about 1960, 1962, thereabouts. Perhaps a little bit later, some of them. And even now, some still soldier on, having been rebuilt, refurbished, and some converted into what is now known as Class 57 and used, thanks to Jerry Anderson, as Thunderbirds, i.e. rescue locomotives on standby in case of breakdowns. And in the case of the Great Western Railway, I think they haul the Night Riviera sleeper train. And of course, bringing things right up to date for 1979, a high-speed train unit. Now, this would be known as a locomotive class 43, something or other, but in those days, they were given unit numbers. This would be 254 for the Eastern Main Line, whatever unit number that is underneath there. So, yes, a really good day's train. To be fair to British Railways, or British Rail as it was then, back in the 70s, they did at least try to experiment with high-speed rail, uh, but trying high speed on existing tracks with tilting trains and what have you. This was one of the units, the APTE. This was a gas turbine unit, which sadly didn't really get very far off the drawing board. When I turned round after taking the last photo, I saw this lot. Unfortunately, only having a little 35mm pull-out electric at the time, it didn't have a zoom on it. I have tried zooming in on the computer. I can't work out the loco's name, but the only logical one I can think of is Sir Nigel Gresley visiting for the day. But behind it, left to right, we have a Class 47, a 31, and a 45. And with that, let's go inside. Let's a look from the main gallery. But nothing, unfortunately, of any great detail, but you'll notice the apple green steeple cab loco there. That was built in 1902 for work around the Newcastle Quay area, and was unusual in that not only could it take its current from the overhead, but also from a third rail, because there were some tunnels in which the overhead wouldn't fit. And they lasted until well after British Railways was established in 1948. This was a display of carriages around the turntable. There's an APT E1 in the middle there, but the star of the show was what you can see right in the centre in a sort of banana and white. These were Tyne and Wear metro cars. They hadn't even entered service yet in 1979, and they were celebrating electric traction. And here we have the final slide. There's our friend on the left again, 84001, which we saw to date on display last year in 2025. And here it was already at the Railway Museum in 1979, alongside the uniquely southern Class 71 electro. Well, it became eventually a Class 74 converted to electro diesel. At this time, it was purely electric, Class 71, designed specifically for working in the marshalling yards of the southern region, which were fitted with 750 volts DC overhead collection, and then out on the main line it would operate in third rail collection. And there you see it with its golden arrow headboard, because after the demise of steam, these locos took over the operation of the golden arrow from Victoria to Dover. And that brings me to the end of this I hope it hasn't been too boring for you. I could have just played music with written captions, but I don't think they would have conveyed anywhere near enough information. So I've chosen to instead to do it a little bit like we had it when I was at school. We had these rolls of a film. What name would you give them? Anyway, you know what I mean. And as each picture was projected, the teacher would give us a spiel. Film strips. That's what it is. So I've approached it from the point of view of film strip, and I hope you okay with that. If you're still here, thank you very much for watching. I will not bore you any longer. This is the end of this particular video. The next time I'm back off to my beloved Wales. So we will see you then, and take care.